This story happened long ago. Who wrote it, no one knows. It's been told in many ways, found in books and in plays, and someone even came along and put the words into a song. I first found it in a book. I read it once, that's all it took, and I told this story many times. And now I'd like to make it rhyme and put a slant to some degree to the story of three trees. Well, up on a hill, not far away, there grew three trees. And some folks say there is a story to be told about those trees to the young and the old. So I climbed that hill just to find three stumps the woodsman left behind. And I grit my teeth and my temper burned, and as I turned to show frustration towards those men, there was a stillness, and then the wind whipped around my head so strong it made me feel there's something wrong. And I set to leave, and the tree that had grown near where I stood said, "Tell our story if you would." And I thought, are you for real or pretend? And then they started talking again. And they said, "My wish has always been that this wood that grew within would be carved in a box so rare that the greatest treasure would be there. And folks would come from afar to see, and all the jewels and gold I had in me." And the tree that grew behind, he said, "That's not what I had in mind. I want to be a vessel who'll sail the ocean blue and be made so fine that kings will stand in line to ride in me." And the third tree, he said, "I pray each day that I will stay right here where I am and grow to be the tallest tree. And folks will come from miles to see, and when they look up to the sky, they'll think of God." Well, that was a lot to hear. They made their wishes very clear. But they said disappointment came, and the tree that claimed his fame through a treasure box, well, he said they dragged him through the door of the carpenter's shop with something else in store. For on that day it seemed their need was to have boxes for the feed for the animals. And the tree that grew behind, that had in mind to be a vessel out in the ocean wide and kings would want to ride, well, the shop they took him in made his chances mighty slim, for fishing boats were in demand instead of ships as he had planned. And that third tree, his tale was saddest yet. Because the fishermen he met, well, they dragged him in and sliced him into long, strong beams and threw him with the others. So it seemed that instead of pointing to the sky, he was on the ground. And he wondered why things had to turn out just this way. But yet he knew that he could pray. Well, this next part is the best part yet, one that you won't forget. For one night when it was dark, and that tree that a treasure box wanted to be, and ended up in a shed as a feeding box that fed the animals. Well, a light shone down from above, and that stable, it was filled with love by a baby so soft and warm as it was placed in the feeding box with arms that showed a mother's trust to hold the child. And that tree knew his wish had come true, for he was holding, although small, the greatest treasure of them all. And the tree that grew behind and had in mind to be a vessel out in the ocean wide and kings would want to ride, but ended up by the waterway as a fishing boat where they dragged the fish in every day. Well, one night he was set to sea by a group of men who seemed to flee the crowd that was gathered there, and one of the men he found where he could rest while the others manned the bait and threw out the line, and everything seemed to be going fine until the sky grew black as night and a fierce storm began its flight, and the men, they had doubt that this little boat would stay en route. By only man and oar could they get that fishing boat back to shore. So they woke that man, and when he stood, he reached out through those heavy clouds and calmed the sea and stopped the storm. And that tree knew his wish that kings could ride did come true. For this man that stood with outreached hand was none other than the great I Am. And the third tree that wanted to grow to be the tallest tree, and folks would come to see and look up towards the sky and think of God. Well, we know his dream was marred as he was drug into that lumber yard, and for years that's where he stayed. Turned from shades of brown and beige to gray, but yet he knew that he could pray. But then, one day, confusion sore, and a man with garments torn was pushed and shoved and scoffed and scorned. He couldn't walk and he could hardly stand, but they made him pick me up on their command and dragged me towards the hill. And I heard his cry and I heard his moan, and I wanted him to know he wasn't alone, and so I held him tight, and I felt his pain, and I felt the nail, and I heard him cry out to God, "Oh, why?" But we both knew he was to die upon this cross made from my beam, to rid man of their sins who plead, and all his pain caressed my soul. It made me cry, but it made me whole. And I knew that my wish had come true, for each time they look at me, they would not see a tree or this broken man. They would see a cross, and they would think of God. These words I put in rhyme take me on a journey back in time. And I want to thank the one who years ago use 3 trees to tell the story of Jesus to me. And I'll look up at the sky each day and I'll think of God. And I'll climb that hill and I'll pray.